Hi, welcome everybody. Please give us a few more moments to make sure that all families have been able to log in, and we'll get started momentarily. Hi, everybody. Give us a few more moments to make sure that all of our families have been able to log into our webinar, and we'll get started shortly. Hi, everybody. Give us a few more moments to make sure that all families have been able to log in, and we'll get started. Hello, my name is Ronaldo Lunagakid, and I want to welcome you all to the fifth and final webinar of the 2021 Fall Family Webinar Series. I'm the Assistant Director in the First Year Center, and tonight I am joined by my colleague, Will Andrews, Associate Director for Residential Life. We are so excited that you've chosen to join us for tonight's conversation about housing selection. Some information before we get started. First, tonight's conversation is for parents and families of students in the classes of 2023, 2024, and 2025. If your student has been admitted for the next year, congratulations and welcome to WashU. This information will not be applicable for incoming first-year students, however. Information about housing selection for the incoming class of 2026 will be sent out later in the spring. Second, we want to make sure you know how to submit questions during this webinar. You will notice that we've given you the ability to ask questions via the Q&A feature at the bottom of the screen. Our professional staff within the First Year Center are helping to field these questions. To make sure you know how to use the Q&A feature, please share the place you're watching from, and we'll name a few of them on air live. Third, we will be showing a PowerPoint created by our panelists during tonight's webinar. However, if you prefer to download the PowerPoint and follow along on your own, please use the link that we will share in the chat. As a note, in the chat feature, we will be sharing links and email addresses for the duration of the webinar. This webinar is being recorded live. Next week, it will be uploaded to the families.woostel.edu website. In a moment, we will hear from our panelists about housing selection. If something he says sparks a question, don't forget to send it to us using the Q&A feature. After the presentation, we will move into a question and answer portion of the evening. Before passing things along to Will, I want to share some of the places that people are joining us from tonight. We have families tuning in from Palm Beach Gardens, Florida, Shorewood, Illinois, Denver, Colorado, among many other locations. Now, since I know you all want to hear more about housing selection, I will turn it over to Will.
Thank you. Again, my name is Will Andrews. I'm the Associate Director of Residential Life and manage housing operations. So I'd like to basically have a conversation with you parents about our housing selection process. So to keep it simple and sweet, our housing application is broken up into three parts. It is apply, the students will then group, and then they will select a room. So when your student's ready to apply for housing, students who are interested in living in our managed property, they should apply by our deadlines. They'll submit an application, and then they'll also have an opportunity to submit a living, learning, community application if they want to take part of that process. Our application is going live January the 4th, and it will close on January 31st. When it's time for students to start grouping, We want students to form groups with their peers based off of who they want to live with first, and then second, where they will live. Students are going to be encouraged to, we are creating 4 opportunities for students to form groups and participate in meeting with other students. There will be recorded information sessions available for students by weeks in, and along with additional in-person information sessions that our team will be leading to answer students' questions. So again, the takeaway from this slide is we're going to ensure students are aware while they're on winter break about housing selection. And then when they return in the spring, there'll be opportunities for them to participate in webinars, and then also some in-person opportunities for students to ask questions about the process. So once we get into our next process, which is the select phase, students will be assigned a time slot. Now, this time slot is important because this will be the time students will be able to go in and actually select the room themselves. Time slots are randomly assigned, and basically the group leader for the group will select the room for the group. This year, we'll have options for students to participate in our residential college round and also the general, which will apply, and we'll go over a little of those later. But all of those details are on our website that talks about what is a residential college and what is the general process for students selecting. Again, the most important piece is it is the group leader that your students impart, which your student could be a group leader that would go in and select the room for the students. We do have living learning communities within our portfolio. And again, on this slide, we have, they're listed below. Sakina, Hamsini, Women in STEM, and then Design Your Own. Again, we're going to have some opportunities for students to learn more about these different themed communities and how they can apply to be a part of them. For parents, the most important question is deciding if they should cancel or not. And it's important for students to understand our cancellation policies. Again, students may cancel their housing application request through March 21st with no penalty. Cancellations received or approved after the 31st will be charged a $500 cancellation fee. Any cancellations after June 15th must be approved by the school for withdrawals, defers, or leave of absence. And there is a $500 cancellation fee for those cancellations. Again, I always encourage, we send out reminders to students as these cancellation days come up because we do recognize individual students' plans do change. We do have fraternity housing, and how that works is for students who are offered a bid and accept from their fraternity, they should communicate with their chapter house about their housing application process. Again, all students who, male student or students in general that want to participate in the fraternity housing process will have the opportunity through their house process to live in the house. And then again, we do have gender inclusive housing that does not take gender into consideration when assigning housing. Students have the opportunity to form groups with whomever, no matter gender, sex, of who they want to live with for the upcoming year. And again, all of this information can be found on our website, and I encourage all of you to review it, which will spell out all in detail of the housing selection process. Thank you.
Hi, folks. Sorry about that. I am having a little bit of computer issues, but hopefully we've been able to take care of that, which is why my computer was going a little bit nutso. Thank you, Will, so much for sharing that insightful information. Before we jump into some question and answer pieces, I have a question that I know many families may be wondering. What resources, if any, does the university provide regarding non-WashU off-campus housing?
So we have a dedicated assistant director for off-campus neighborhood relations that has put together basically a pamphlet and is there to assist students who choose to live in neighbor off-campus communities. So we do have resources there that help students with how to review a lease, or how to manage reporting damages to an off-campus landlord. So we do offer resources there to support students in that process. And then, so yes, we definitely have that available to support students there.
Great, thank you so much, Will. We will now move on to the remainder of our question and answer portion of this webinar. As a reminder, please submit your questions via the Q&A feature. Will, could you further discuss housing options for rising juniors and seniors? What housing options are there both on and off campus for those two student populations?
So for juniors and seniors, we plan to have options available in probably in our off-campus apartments. We have several apartment buildings that are very close to campus that also have shuttle access available. On-campus housing is being reserved for the incoming first-year students and as many of our sophomore students that we can have on campus. But juniors and seniors will have priority in selecting off-campus apartments in our housing selection process.
And to clarify, these are off-campus apartments that are within residential life, correct?
That is correct. We have resident directors, we have RAs that are all there to support students living in our off-campus apartments.
So Will, you just mentioned sophomore level or second year level students. Will there be room for all second year students to live in WashU housing if they choose?
Yes, we guarantee housing for all sophomore students. We try our best to keep as many of the sophomore students on the main campus. Some of our sophomore students will live in the apartment area, but a lot of times those are by their choice. They want to live in those communities, but for the most part, majority of all sophomores would have the opportunity to live in on-campus housing.
Thank you. Will, what options and resources are there for students who are having trouble finding a roommate or finding other folks to live with?
We, again, as I said in our presentation, we will have several roommate mixers for students to participate in. We also have a roommate finder in the housing application where students can fill out some questions and then also search to see how they match up to other students to request roommates. But then again, I think one of the biggest support they're going to have are their residential college directors and their RAs. Again, we encourage those students to talk if they're having a hard time meeting other students to connect with. But then again, even if they don't want to go through that process, we have a process to support those students where we will place them based off of how they match up with other students if they choose not to form a group in the process.
Will, you mentioned group leaders during your presentation. Can you share a little bit more or reiterate some of the pieces around the role of the group leader during room selection?
Yes. So when students form groups, they have to designate a group leader. And it's typically the student that forms the group first is the one who is the group leader. Throughout the whole process, if the group leader is not able to fulfill the group leader responsibilities, they can reassign the group leader responsibilities to another member in the group. The main purpose of the group leader is When the group is issued a time slot, that group leader is the one that will log into the housing portal and select the room and assign the rooms of the other group members to their placement. So again, that group leader is the leader who's going to log into the portal. And a lot of times I've seen it where the groups will all get together and huddle around the computer and look at the many different options and assign it that way. But we leave that in the control of the students, and they decide how they want to go about doing it. But that's really the role of the group leader.
Great. So to pivot a little bit, what are some of the benefits of living learning communities?
So our living learning communities are focused around themes and an opportunity to connect with some faculty members. Sometimes the learning communities are great opportunities to meet similar people that have similar interests as yourself. And they live in community together. We have a dedicated team that's dedicated there to support and to help that learning that's taking place out of the classroom. But that's really our purpose of our living learning communities. And they're great opportunities, again, to connect with people that share many of your same interests. So very similar to Hamsini, that focus around the African-American student experience. They live together in community. They hold cooking activities, and they connect with other WashU professors on campus centered around the African-American experience or African experience of students on campus.
So it sounds like a really great out-of-classroom learning opportunity to both live with and to learn from peers. Will, we're going to change gears again a little bit. We have some folks who are asking, does residential life provide summer housing for students staying in St. Louis for research or local internships? If not residential life, then what entity should my student be thinking about?
Yes. So the summer housing application will open in the spring semester, and students who are enrolled in a program will have the opportunity to apply because there's several sessions for summer school. If they want to do internship housing, those opportunities are also available. And all of that information gets released through our summer conference program. And so yes, to answer your question, we do have housing available for students choosing to stay in the greater St. Louis region through residential life.
Will, you'd mentioned a little bit about fraternity housing. So for students who are choosing to go through fraternity recruitment, are they able to wait until after recruitment ends to sign up and select their housing group? These students may be thinking about this if they hope to live with students in their chapter. Like, can you elaborate a little bit more about that, since some of those processes may be happening in similar timelines?
So the process does happen in similar timelines. Students will know if they have a bid prior to the room selection process. If they receive a bid and they accept that bid, a likelihood of the student needing to live in the house will be great. Students, the fraternities have a certain number that they have to meet. And if there's openings in the house, students are going to have to work with their chapter leader, their house managers, about the process of how students are selected to live in the house. But so yes, does that answer your question?
Absolutely.
Great.
Will, does residential life manage, does residential life allow pets to be within their housing facilities?
So we do not allow just pets, but we do allow service animals, medically approved comfort support animals, which have to go through a process of approval with disability resources. So again, any student needing a pet for any reason would go through disability resources to make the request. And then through housing, we would assign the student in a space that we felt that would be comfortable for their animal and for themselves to be able to live in community.
Well, I know that we have some families who are asking in our chat. So they shared that they know that the village has in the past been a space for rising juniors and seniors. Just to clarify, is WashU no longer offering north side or on-campus housing for rising juniors next year or rising seniors next year? If juniors and seniors can only live, well, actually, let's answer that first question, and then I have a follow-up from there.
So there's potentially a chance that we may be able to open up more on-campus north side housing for upperclassmen students. But again, at this time, we're still in a pandemic phase. And until we know more from our health professionals of how much space we can open up or how many spaces we need to keep offline to support Q&I housing, space is limited when it comes to on-campus housing in our village area. So to ensure we have space for as many of our sophomores to live on campus, that has displaced some of our juniors and seniors in living in our off-campus apartments. But if it does change, we will notify all students of the process, and if they're able to sign up, we would give juniors and seniors priority in signing up for the on-campus apartments like we would traditionally in our process.
So to clarify, it sounds like juniors and seniors will have off-campus housing through residential life. And if there is space, then there may be some juniors and seniors who may live on campus as well. But is it typical for juniors and seniors to live off campus in apartment style housing?
Yes, typically in a normal year, majority of juniors and seniors live in our off-campus apartments. We only have 2 apartments that are on campus, which is Village East and the Millbrook apartments. But again, at this time, many of the Millbrook apartments have been taken offline. And then to support the de-densification of our residential halls, this year, sophomores are living in areas traditionally juniors and seniors would have had the opportunity to live in.
Yeah. So as an alumnus, I know that juniors and seniors have been off campus or have chosen to live off campus as a great option. And that residential life has worked with the surrounding community to create a great housing situation for our upperclassmen. Can you speak a little bit to how WashU ensures safety and security in the areas surrounding campus? Well,
yes. So all of our areas, our buildings are locked down. We have security that monitors our areas where our students are living in the community. And even for those that are living outside of the residential life portfolio, we've worked really hard with WUPD to provide neighborhood support. Even on our walkway where we encourage students to walk to and from campus when they're living in the off-campus area, we have security guards that are walking along those pathways to ensure the safety of all students. We have the blue light systems that are also available in our loft area where many of our juniors and seniors live. If they have cars, parking is included in their housing, so it's all coupled together. So we provide it so that they can park in a secure parking garage while living on the loop. And we also have dedicated security officers at both desks at the lofts to support students there to ensure the safety of them, and even those that monitor and walk around the building. So again, very safe in our community, in our apartments that are off campus. And We also have the shuttle. So the shuttles that run and drop off students. So if students don't feel comfortable walking to and from those locations, there's dedicated shuttle services that get students back and forth to campus.
So it sounds like there are many, many aspects of presence in the community that we have from both a safety perspective, from a community development perspective, with our staff who focus on the off-campus experience. So that's really, really great.
And we have RAs that are also in our off-campus apartment, neighborhood liaisons, community directors. So again, the students aren't going to feel like they're out there on their own. Again, it's the areas are full of students, and many of them, if not all, really do enjoy it once they find it. Again, the restaurant options that are available to them in the area, the theater, once all these things start coming back to life.
Thank you. Will, we have some questions around housing that around COVID, basically. So does residential life anticipate students primarily not being able to share rooms again or share suites? Can you talk a little bit about whether students are going to be able to live in groups? And I know that this question is a little bit tougher because not tougher per se, but the added complexity of most of our upperclassmen housing being apartment style with single rooms also. So can you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, so I would say majority of all of our upperclassmen housing students do live in singles. It's too early for us to determine what it will look like for those potentially, which again is a small number. I think it's less than 20% of upperclassmen housing potentially could live in doubles, of what that would look like. But again, we will make it available in a traditional year. Yes, we do have doubles, and those are spread out in our suite style units. And traditionally, some students do live in those doubles. So to answer your question, some will, but majority of those sophomores, juniors, and seniors, especially juniors and seniors, they will all live in singles. Some of our sophomores, I would say about 20% of the class, if they return through housing, will be living in a double room. And if we have to go back to a single, then that would be adjusted. But at this time, the goal would be for them to live in a double suite.
Got it. So it sounds like the majority of students will be living in singles that are in community with each other. So what you would have as a single bedroom with a shared space amongst a couple of other suite mates. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, awesome. Will, I know that magic numbers off the top of your head is a tough question to ask, but I'm going to ask it anyways.
Yes.
What percentage of sophomores and juniors and seniors, if you can even just give us a guesstimate, choose to live in residential life managed housing? And yes, so do you have that number? And if not,
I will tell you majority of the current freshman class who will apply for housing as a sophomore, we retain majority of those students. I would say it's less than 10% that may not apply for housing with residential life. And the number from the junior year going up is typically, you do see some of the juniors wanting to move off campus, which that's traditionally. So we will, and then you'll have in a normal year when students are going abroad and so forth, we do retain more students because we have more of a flexible cancellation policy, which will allow a student to cancel in the fall so that they can study abroad in the spring. And then for the seniors, I will say the number's smaller. We retain a lot of seniors, but many of them do find their friend circles within the community. We have enough housing to support all students who want to live in residential life housing. But as parents, as your students get older, they do want to look at, especially in that junior and senior year, at options that are in our off-campus area.
Will, can you speak a little bit more on gender inclusive housing? Like, what does that mean? How do students access those kinds of spaces, et cetera?
So one piece, when the student comes in as a freshman, we assign them based off their um, gender of choice, and we place them in community that way. In their upperclassmen years, sophomore, juniors, and senior, students can choose who they want to live with. It doesn't matter the gender of anyone. And then for those students who are concerned about a mix of gender living in a suite, they have the opportunity on their housing application to indicate that they're not open to gender inclusive housing. And if they form a group that's non-inclusive, then that suite, if someone drops from the group or doesn't join the apartment suite, that room would always stay a non-gender inclusive space. So example, if it's 3 women, a student drops out, we would never place a male student in the space. But if it was a mixed group that had a male student and 2 female students, and let's say a female dropped out of the space, there is a chance a male student could be placed in that space. So again, we allow the students to pick for themselves. And sometimes parents get very surprised by that, actually. They're like, I didn't know you could do that. Again, we want the students to feel comfortable with who they want to live with.
Great, thank you. Will, can students submit applications for both general housing and living learning community housing, or are students only allowed to apply for one of the options?
No, yeah, great. Thank you. That's a great question. So all students who want to live in housing are required to submit a housing application. If they want to participate in the living learning community, that's a separate application that they will also need to submit. But yes, the housing application, all students who want to live in housing are required to complete that application. And then secondly, if they want to participate in an LLC, they'll submit an application for that.
Will, you'd mentioned a little bit about RAs. Are there RAs in both the village or the north side, as well as off-campus housing? As well as, can you answer about whether there are professional staff members who work with both the village and off-campus housing?
Yes, we have RAs in all of our facilities on and off campus and on the north side. We have faculty. We have a faculty that lives off campus, and we have a faculty living on the north side of the village, as we do on the South 40. We also have, again, professional staff, adults living in the off-campus community as well, and also on the north side with the students. So we have very good representation of all staff across our portfolio supporting students.
Will, can you speak to some options for students who may initially choose to live in privately owned housing or a non-residential life managed housing situation, but then for a number of reasons that housing situation falls through? Is there an option that residential life has that for some of those students who are in some of these stickier situations?
So once our housing application closes, we will have a wait list of students. If they want to submit their name to the wait list process, they can add their name there. Because we are normally full in the fall, placement for students on the wait list may not come until August. But yes, students who, if their housing does fall through for any reason, will have the opportunity to put their name on our housing wait list. They will not be able to participate in the process of selecting a room or joining a group, but they will be able to put their name in our wait list.
But it sounds like folks that are in that situation may have like a great opportunity to connect with that staff member that you mentioned who works with students in all kinds of off-campus housing, right?
That is correct.
Awesome. Will, could you speak to what Quadrangle is? Is that a service connected to WashU, or is it a privately owned company? Like what is that?
Quadrangle is a property management company that is WashU housing. Quadrangle, and it's probably because we did acquire some of the Quadrangle properties last year due to the pandemic stuff, but it really serves for the graduate student population. But they do have housing that is available that's that individual could sign leases for. But it is WashU owned properties that are managed through Quadrangle. And then for those, if you're looking at their website, there's parallel properties also. And the difference between our parallel properties are those are not WashU owned, but they're WashU managed. And those are open market units that any student could apply for, undergraduate, graduate, non-WashU. You don't have to be affiliated with WashU to live in parallel properties, but with Quadrangle properties, those are only WashU affiliated individuals living in those properties. But again, those are geared towards graduate students.
Will, I have a parent who has written us that says that they have a student who is planning to study abroad next year. So not this upcoming spring, but the following spring. What should students do if they only need housing for one semester?
So I would encourage those students to apply for housing with Residential Life. Once we receive a list from the study abroad program of all the students who've been approved for a study abroad experience, we will cancel their housing contract with no penalty and then allow them to go abroad. And then in their senior year coming back, they will be able to participate in the housing selection process if they want to live in Residential Life managed housing.
Will, what resources are available to students in non-WashU housing who might be having difficult roommate situations or things like that?
So again, we have our assistant director of off-campus neighborhood liaison. His name is Evan Kyle. And we also have a team of neighborhood liaisons that live in the community with where a lot of our off-campus students live. I would encourage their student to email Evan, and Evan has led, again, coach students on how to manage some of these tough conversations or mediate situations between roommates throughout the process. So there are resources there. And again, it's definitely through that office where we support with our neighborhood liaisons program. I would say we've had times where, again, some roommate situations haven't worked out. So how do you manage going through, well, I need to move out or not, or how do I sublease because this just isn't a good fit, or I need to move on campus. Every situation is different, but Residential Life is here. We have dedicated team members here to support students that are faced with those challenges. We provide recommendations. I can't always promise we can fix it.
Well, is there priority housing by class or by school year? So is there a different priority if you're a senior versus a junior versus a sophomore?
Sophomores, we're going to try our best. We are prioritizing them to live on campus. So that's why the South 40 and Village locations are going to be a priority for our sophomores. And then for juniors and seniors, their priority is going to be in the off-campus apartments.
Great. Well, you mentioned a little bit about when you were talking about emotional support animals, et cetera. How does this, but I know that this topic runs a larger gambit of pieces beyond just that top, just emotional support animals. So how does a student apply for disability accommodations when it comes to housing? Like, what is the process that you would suggest students take for that?
So there is a portal on the Disability Resource website where students have to, they can click on, they'll log in with their WUSTL information, and there will be several questions of things they're going to have to answer and an opportunity to upload supporting documentation that will be reviewed by health professionals to determine if an accommodation can be approved. In this case, a pet, as long as there's appropriate documentation there that serves and supports what the student needs. So again, all of this is in their student portal that from a housing, I do not have, none of my staff have access to. Again, it's accommodations are approved through disability resources. And then from a housing, we then assign the student to support the accommodations that a student's been approved for.
Right. Family members, make sure to take a look. As a reminder, we are putting links in the chat. If that situation applies to you, you can find that intake form for the disability resources right there in the chat. Will, can every member see the choices of rooms before the group leader makes a choice? If not, like, what are things that have typically happened when it comes to the actual selection of rooms that you would suggest groups take?
So only the group leader will be allowed to log into the portal and see which rooms are available at their group's given time. But because of technology like Zoom and Teams, last year we saw the group leaders sharing their screen with their team members so that with their group members so that they saw what was on the portal. So again, all WashU students have a Zoom account, so they can definitely share the screen so that they can talk it out of, oh, we don't want that space, we really want this. So yeah, that's one way of being able to see it. But in some cases, before all of this Zoom technology, groups met and they kind of made a top 10 list. If that wasn't available, this is where I want to go. If that's not available, we all want to go here. So again, it's about the students talking to one another and setting up some parameters of where they would like to go. Again, we can't guarantee that it will be available. So we want students to prioritize and see what's important to them. So a good example would be, let's say you log in the portal and on the South 40 is where you really want to be, but you see there's only doubles available, but there's singles available in the Village. Hopefully the group has talked about what their priority is. Is it important that they all live in singles, or is it important that they live on the South 40? Those are sometimes the challenges where I think sometimes students have to make sure they prioritize what's most important to them. And
Family
also
members,
costs.
yes, for sure. Family members, make sure that your students have a plan when it comes to the actual selection itself. It's a great way for them to get some practice in talking through with their friends and their groups. So, Will, can you speak to whether students who are studying abroad or graduating early, does that impact the room selection that is available to them or the way that they are prioritized?
If a student is planning to go abroad, they're going to be treated just like any student who's not planning on going abroad, because plans could change. And then for those students who are currently abroad, that are going abroad now, they will have the opportunity to apply for housing just like all the students who are currently here and participate in the process.
Will, you've talked a lot about groups. Can a student apply for housing on their own, for example, not as a member of a group, in order to be randomly assigned or to be in a single space? And if that's not possible, what is the minimum group size?
So for students applying to live in the suites, we have very few, we don't have any singles that will be available for students to select by themselves. So that process is very group oriented. For students wanting to live in the apartments, we do have quite a few one-bedroom apartments to support students wanting a single, even studios. Again, but in our off-campus, juniors and seniors have priority in selecting those single apartments over a sophomore would have to select. But as far as not having a group and going as an individual, we will place the student if a student's not able, especially if they're a sophomore wanting to live, which majority of sophomores will live in a suite their sophomore year. If they are not able to form a group, we will assign them at some point in the process where they're living in a suite with other sophomore students. I believe there was another part to your question.
Yeah, so what is the minimum group size slash like how many students should be in a group?
So we encourage sophomore students to form groups of 4. That's what I have the most in my housing portfolio. And then we encourage students living off campus in our off-campus apartments to form groups of 3, which is a majority, but we do have 2s and 1 bedrooms available. Those numbers will be released to students prior to them starting to form groups so that they're aware of what our inventory would be available to them. But for sophomores, they need to form groups of 4. 4 is the magic number.
Well, you'd mentioned earlier when we were talking about living learning communities about the DYO, design your own living learning community. Can you speak a little bit more to that, like what a student might need to think about or what their group might need to think about?
So the design your own gives students the ability to, all of our established programs were all a design your owns at one point. And then they grew into these established living learning communities that have continued to grow. So that's why they have their own shield, because it's become a tradition. They've created traditions in which students want to live in those communities. Design your own is an opportunity for you to present an idea, a student to present an idea of a living learning community that their peers or other students they think may be interested in applying for. Again, we don't guarantee that all design your owns are approved, but if you're able to, if the student is able to show the importance, why they're interested in it, how it ties back to some form of learning, maybe potentially having a faculty component to it, there's a really good chance their living learning community can be selected to live in the community.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Will. We are going to ask one last question for the evening. So Will, thank you so much for the information that you've shared tonight. So our last question is, how can parent and family members best support their students as they approach navigating housing selection?
Great. So I'm going to take it in several parts. I think the most important thing I want all of our parents up here to do is remind your student to apply for housing. Our students get very busy in their lives, and sometimes they just forget. So that's why we're opening it up on the 4th in the new year, January 4th, even while many of the students are at home, so that parents could remind their student to apply, because a lot of times when they get back to campus, they're so excited, they're not thinking about it, they're focused on many different things. But every year, students that say, oh, I totally forgot about applying for housing, and our application has already closed. So that's one. And then I think also encouraging your student to it's really important that they pick people that they really want to live with, and really evaluate what their first experience living on campus was and what they want their next experience to be. They should come to our roommate mixers and meet new people. And they should also, consider our living learning communities. But the number one is remind them to apply for housing. So many students forget that one piece because they just forget.
Well, thank you so much again. Families, we hope you were able to learn some valuable information this evening. As a reminder, this webinar recording will be shared at families.wusel.edu next week. We ask that you stay tuned for more information about our spring 2022 family webinar series next semester. You will find that information about those webinars at the families.wusel.edu website. Have a good night.